You like that? This is really sweet. Excellent. Well, welcome. Thank you for wearing matching outfits. That was amazing.
Shoes, you messed up.
Yeah. I know, right? But I'm really excited to have this conversation with you and kind of just set a foundation. Avero and Third Stage are both technology agnostic and independent advisory services. So the function of services like that is they're really dedicated to achieving the goals of the clients. And they help with vendor coordination, project management, all of those different things. So there's some crossover between the two of them. And funny story, we actually met AV and his team at the Inc. 5000 conference. We were both on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies in the US. And we met him and his team, and we had such a great culture match. We were like, are we friends? Are we frenemies? And we just were drawn to each other throughout the event. So we knew there would be some great synergies in working together. So with that, I'm going to let both of them introduce themselves, and then we have a great debate. So as I told you, we're going to really drill these guys with debate questions around ERP and what does it mean for enterprise technology. So I have some questions planned for them. I'll ask one of them, and the other one will be able to respond with a rebuttal. But I want you to be thinking of your questions and what you really want to look at as far as conversations with these two CEOs. So with that, I'm actually going to start with you, AB.
Thank you.
And introduce Avero and yourself.
Thank you. So Avero Advisors is a company that focuses on digital transformation and ERP consulting for the public sector across the US. I founded the firm in 2016, but I think I've worked all my life in this industry, feels like it. But the match of how I came up with this or fell into this industry is interesting. I've always been the kid that opened up radios to see what was inside. But then I got 2 master's degrees in accounting. And I realized I don't want to be an accountant. So ERP consulting helps me meld those two things together. And so we work with cities, counties, school districts, utilities, councils of governments across the US, and have a great time doing it. Thank you.
Excellent, absolutely. And Eric, we do know you, but give us your elevator talk of what Third Stage is and why you started it.
Sure. So my name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO of Third Stage. I started the company in 2018, and I actually started my career, maybe a similar convergence into this space that was unplanned, was I got my MBA in '98, and I got hired by Price Waterhouse, and then I immediately thought I'm going to be a strategy consultant and a business consultant. And the first thing they did is they sent me to SAP training to get certified in SAP in a 6 or 8 week course. And I resisted it. I went kicking and screaming and finally got certified because I had no choice. I was 24 years old, and to have a job at PwC, I needed to be certified in SAP. So anyway, I still didn't want to do ERP, so I sort of resisted it, tried to do like change management, process improvement, and then I quickly realized it's all one and the same. If you can do, you can't do strategy without technology, you can't do technology without strategy. So that I sort of bumped into the ERP space, but it's kind of ironic or funny, if you will, that I had no desire to be an ERP consultant, and now this is all I do. So I started Third Stage in 2018, much like Avero, with the intent and the vision of being independent and tech agnostic, unaffiliated with vendors, so that we could really represent clients' best interest and be an extension of their teams and really focus on their success, not so much on the technology, the success of the vendors. So that's really the premise for the company.
Absolutely. So a great opportunity to really ask any question. So the point of this conversation is, we know, as Eric says, and AV a lot, it depends, right? It depends on your scenario. So I'm going to give them the opportunity to kind of talk about conflicting approaches or different areas in which you can strategically approach your digital transformation, and give them the option to weigh in on different opinions. So we're going to start with the number one failure point of a digital transformation. So we know from data, from a lot of data sources, that 80% of digital transformations fail. And that's one of the trends that we're trying to buck, everyone on the stage, to ensure that you have and are armed with the ability to understand why failures happen and forward think in your strategic approach. So knowing that, I'm going to give it to you first, Eric. What is the number one reason digital transformations fail?
Lack of change management, lack of focus on change management.
What about you, Amy?
So am I supposed to take the opposite?
You can take the same. No,
Same?
no, we can be on the
We agree
same
on a lot
team.
of things, so we're gonna try and
Yeah,
find different ways to disagree.
Right.
I think it's the people, right? You focus on technology, picking the right product, but your people are not ready or willing to go on this ride with you. So kind of change management, but at the very lowest levels, people that will actually be using your system need to be made aware that that's going to be a change. There's going to be a lot of work for everybody for a year or so. And then change management layered on top of it. If you don't do that, it's going to fail.
yeah, that user adoption, that, frontline administration, really understanding what it looks like from a day-to-day mentality. So kind of the same answers, but differing variabilities for that. So one of the evolutions that we've seen in this space is moving from a core ERP to a best-of-breed solution, whether it's industry-specific or department-specific, all kinds of different reasons that you might do that. So I'll ask you, AB, would you go core ERP or best-of-breed?
Can I say it depends again?
I mean, we usually last about 5 minutes before I say you can't say it depends, and it actually does depend. So you're allowed to say it depends.
Okay. So it
I'll
depends
allow it.
on the industry and where you are today and what kind of organization you're running. Core ERPs are the trend in the clientele that we serve, right? They've been implemented 20 years ago. It's one system that claims to do everything for you, but doesn't. And now you have the opportunity to either go get another one that looks and feels or claims to do the same things. But you can also go best of breed, meaning really pick a product that suits a particular function for you, and then go that way. I think I lean towards best of breed for larger organizations, especially in the public sector, because to my knowledge, not one system can do it all. And earlier today, someone asked a question, which product is the best to work with? None of them are, right? You have to make them work
Poor
for you.
Marcus got that question.
Yes.
Absolutely. So what do you think, Eric? Best of breed versus core ERP?
Well, since this is a debate, I want to make sure we're picking opposite sides here. So what was your answer? What was your real
I
answer?
think best of breed.
Okay, you picked best of breed. Then I'm just by default going to say single ERP. And this debate style, let's focus on two opposing sides, and we'll pick a side, right, for the rest of the questions. So I'll pick the side of single ERP just because you picked the other. So I'm going to say single ERP. And by the way, when I give these answers, and I think when you give these answers, if we're picking a side, an extreme to choose, we're just digging in our heels and doing this debate style and defending that side, right? It doesn't. Some of the stuff I say, I may not necessarily fully agree with, but I'm going to argue it anyway. So here's my argument for single ERP. Single ERP, single source of truth. It's more integrated. It's an easier from a user adoption perspective because you have one system to learn versus multiple systems. I don't have to worry about integration. Upgrades are easier because I've got one single system. And if I want a common operating model and I want to standardize my operations, then single ERP is the way I would go.
There you go. Very good. And so let's go into another one that's very polarizing. So agile versus waterfall. So you can pick one side or another. I'll start with you, Eric. But if you want some, outside commentary, you want to laugh a little bit, definitely go on Eric's TikTok and see his agile versus waterfall, what the comments are, because they definitely are a very polarizing conversation. So Eric, agile or waterfall?
I think I know what my opposition's going to say, so I'm going to play some reverse psychology because he's going to have to answer it the way I want him to answer it that way. So I'm going to say
it's so strategic.
I'm going to say waterfall. I'm going to stick to waterfall, and the reason I'm going to defend waterfall is because you take the time to define your requirements and your processes up front. It allows you to have a blueprint for how you're going to deploy technology, and it gives you a clear vision for how you're going to deploy technology. So waterfall may take a little bit more time up front, but it's going to speed things up later on, as opposed to.
Thank you. And disclaimer, I may say things I don't really believe in.
We need like a PSA sign.
Yeah,
like this
yeah,
is
we do.
for
So-
experimentation purposes only.
Right. So agile is what I would pick if forced to, because it really helps you be flexible. When the requirements change, the business is moving so fast that you can't keep up. If you're waterfall, you're tied into one approach from beginning to end. Agile, you can dance to the music as it's happening, and you can really create the product at the timeline that gives you the outcomes that you need, not what you planned for 5 years ago.
I remember when I was your age. That's something I might have thought back then too. But what I'd say is taking that time up front to really get it right. Knowing that, of course, you can roll it out in iterations and a phased approach, but you still need that clear vision. Otherwise, you're spinning your wheels, going in circles. You're doing your little dancing while we're trying to deploy technology here.
With age comes wisdom, so might be true. But I'm going to stick to my guns, Agile Mix.
Okay.
There you go. It's it depends really, right? But those are the different areas in which we kind of weigh the pros and cons of what the approach is. And the point of that conversation is you really have to make sure you understand what your organization is capable of and what's going to be the best match for your technology and your culture. So definitely a good one there. So again, Avi, you get to pick this time, all right? So on-premise versus cloud solution.
Strategy. Okay, I'm gonna pick cloud. This I believe in, by the way, because it gives you the flexibility. Again, not to the agile levels, but with my clientele, that they're counties, cities, public transit agencies. More often than not, they're behind the curve on technology. 20 plus years behind. They don't have the right systems. They haven't got rid of the tech debt that they've accumulated. So they're also losing a lot of the talent that's been keeping up with these technologies and systems. So the best path for them to modernize is going to the cloud. Now it produces a lot of other challenges, like how do you keep paying for certain things? What happens to our capital expansion programs and funds? But to go from 1990s to 2023, going to the cloud, you could do a hybrid cloud, but put majority of your systems in the cloud, go to a SaaS environment. That's the best way to go from, to get rid of your technical debt, in my opinion.
Well, I guess I'm going to say on-prem then. I'm going to make an argument for on-prem. So the reason you want on-prem and the reason you don't want to go to the cloud is because the cloud, you lose control. You don't have control of your systems, your data. Who knows where your data is, where the apps are? We don't know. Whereas if I install it in my back room server, I know exactly where it is. I can do whatever I want with it. I've got a lot of flexibility. With the on-prem version, I can integrate it. I can customize it. For better or for worse, I can do what I want with that technology. It also gives me a competitive advantage, because I don't have to worry about the SaaS multi-tenant model where I've got the same software that you're using and everyone out here is using. I've got my own version that I can adapt and provide better flexibility to. And it just gives me a competitive advantage too, because it's not, it's not being used by other competitors and others in the organization. And we all know that a good mainframe is very reliable. And those green screens,
hard to break.
They're hard to break, right? They're hard to use, but they're also
Literally, they are hard to break. Absolutely. Well, I want to take a second to see if we have any audience this or that questions that you want them to address before I go on with my list. So anyone want to jump in to have that conversation? Not yet. They're not quite warmed up. Don't worry. I could go all day. Don't even worry about it. So, Eric, to you, either a phased, incremental approach to digital transformation or rapid and disruptive digital transformation.
Okay. I'm going to say, I'm not even going to worry about what I think, what I think you would say. I'll answer it based on my own preference. I'd say phased incremental. Was that the choice?
Yeah, phased incremental or rapid and disruptive.
I'd say phased incremental because most organizations are risk adverse. I mean, some aren't. I know Walker today talked about some very forward-thinking organizations that are super disruptive. Those are newer companies, but let's assume you're not one of these newer companies. You're a legacy company. You've been around for a long time. Those organizations, for better or for worse, are simply not super risk tolerant. So doing an incremental phased approach is typically going to fit their culture better. It's going to allow them to move towards their end state, their desired end state. It might just take them more baby steps to get there, but that's okay because it lowers the risk. You can usually get a more immediate value. You can spend less time and money to get some of that value up front, all the while still heading in that same direction towards a bigger disruption longer term, but you're easing your way into it rather than fighting it off all at once.
Love it. All right, AV, you rapid, disruptive.
Yeah, rip the Band-Aid. Rip the Band-Aid, do it, jump in the deep end. Disclaimer again. But, if you're 30 years behind in technology, and that might seem like a lot, but we have clients today that are working on AS400s. We have one client that's doing, it's a police department. They work on carbon paper and typewriters. So incremental may not be quick enough when you need quick change. And it doesn't have to be the whole organization, right? You can pick, I might be straying into the incremental territory here, but if it's a police department, let's say, you can choose to say, we're gonna rip out the records management process and just go buy something and stick it in there, figure out as you go along, agile way. But overall, I think just ripping the Band-Aid off and jumping in the deep end is the best way to go for digital transformation.
And there's something to be said, I know we're not supposed to agree, but there is something to be said about just going all in and investing and drawing a line in the sand and making that commitment, especially if you're in an industry that is being disrupted.
Right.
So you're gonna be disrupted whether you like it or not. So perhaps you use a digital transformation to get ahead of that curve and be proactive in the way you disrupt your business. So
Yeah.
definitely
Well,
see
and
that.
there's two schools of thought for business process redesign, right? Because that's the first thing you need to do. How does technology change my business processes? How do we change business processes so that we're more efficient?
Mm-hmm.
One school of thought is you incrementally change and tweak things. If you don't have the right tools in place, it doesn't matter. In that case, I think ripping it out and just rebuilding the whole process and the systems that automate things is the best way to go.
There you go. So again, kind of an it depends approach, but understanding there are different approaches is really going to be that knowledge is power and understanding what's best for your organization moving forward. So let's go. Another one. You ready? How you feeling? You need any water?
Good.
All good.
You nervous?
You want water?
No.
So if you're going to look at specifically the IT department, which a lot of times, is a champion of digital transformation along with cross collaboration from other business leaders. So would you do internal IT management of your technology or external outsourcing of IT management for your technology?
Who's going first?
AV, sorry. I was looking at you. He's my
Yeah.
boss, sorry. I was trying to let.
I tend to lean towards outsourcing the basic functions of technology. Right?
Okay.
Again, sorry, it depends. But what are we talking about? Are we talking about retail services,
Mhm.
desktop support, help desk, my printer doesn't work, help me reset my password? What I consider retail services can easily be outsourced. You have managed services providers that do those things and they're not expensive. You're also hedging for the risk of losing talent. In this labor market, it's hard to keep
Sure.
people in those positions. So for those reasons, I think for retail IT services, I would go with an outsourced managed services provider. If it's a custom built in-house thing that Eric built from scratch, and you're gonna need those people to live in your basement for 20 years,
Oh, man.
keeping up with your systems.
He just redid his basement, so it's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to pull from Walker's presentation and sort of paraphrase and twist his words into my advantage and say that basically I'm like Elon Musk. I mean, people call me Elon Musk sometimes because of my brilliance in terms of using technology, knowing that I'm not going to outsource technology. I'm going to use it to my advantage and I'm going to build it the way I want it to create that competitive advantage rather than outsourcing it to a third party. So clearly, you want to, if we're viewing technology as a competitive advantage, we all know that technology is critical to competitiveness going forward. I want that in-house. I don't want to outsource my IT.
There you go. Different approaches, weighing the pros and cons of each is definitely important. So understanding what that looks like for digital transformation, there's a lot of complexities when it comes to the layers. So if you're looking at undergoing a digital transformation, are you looking at outside advisors or an internal core team? And that's to you, Eric.
And you can only pick one or the
You
other.
can only
So
pick, and
it's
this is a
all-
really hard one because
Okay.
usually there's balance. Spoiler alert. But yes.
If I had to choose, I would say do it in-house and you might hire some people selectively that have been through the journey before, but I'd rather see a company, if you had to err on one side, if you're gonna go to one extreme, you might be better off, and even though it works against both of our self-interest, you might be better off going with a fully in-house transformation because the good news is that you own the project. You have complete ownership of it. Even if you don't know, there's a lot of things you don't know, you do have ownership of it, and lack of ownership and lack of internal alignment is one of the big reasons why projects fail. And that helps you overcome that because it forces you to have ownership and you have to have that alignment to move forward. It may not be efficient, it may not be effective long-term because you don't have the outside competencies, but at least you address the alignment and the ownership issue that plagues so many projects.
There you go. Av?
I would say outside help.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of reasons. One, the distance from a problem creates perspective. Like if you all have day jobs, you're keeping up with your systems, your businesses, your technology, and your processes on a daily basis. It's hard to step away and gain some perspective. Outside advisors like us can come in and give you a different perspective, a different speed. And also do a digital transformation project on a full-time basis rather than you having to compete with your day jobs. Like how do you keep a large organization running while doing a large modernization project? It's difficult. So you need outside help at all times. And good outside help can also help you align internal resources because large-scale change doesn't happen if you don't have your executives, your rank and file lined up behind this initiative. So I would start with the outside help and get them to help you organize internally.
Sure. Pros and cons to each approach. Do you invest in that insurance policy for your project by ensuring that you have the experts? But you need to have that internal ownership and that oversight. So definitely some important aspects and characteristics there. So want to give the audience a chance before I keep going here. Anyone want to offer a question? It doesn't have to be a pro and con if you don't want to, if that's too much pressure on. But any questions or offerings for the debate up here from the audience?
Yeah, I have a question.
So let's go here and then we'll go to you, Greg. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Hi, again. Sort of a theme today has been the landscape starts is littered with failure, and we've talked a lot about the steps necessary to achieve success. How would you describe failure and how would you describe success?
That's a good one.
Okay, that's an excellent question. I told him to ask that, just so you know. No, that was all him. Okay, so let's go. Who did we start with last time? You, Av. I think we were starting with Eric.
So I probably define them as sort of like the opposite sides of the same coin. So I would say, the success is going to be the ones that deliver on time, on budget, and deliver the business value that's expected. If you use those three criteria as success, I would say that the failure rate is probably even higher than the 70% metrics that we heard earlier today. Is probably much higher than that. But I think that's the way you have to define success. And if you go in with realistic expectations and you have a plan to value of how you're going to get those benefits, then you should be able to succeed. But I would say that the successes are on time, on budget, and deliver the expected business value. And failure is the opposite of that. If you're not getting it on time, on budget, and you're not getting the business value you expect. In fact, you might argue if you have any one of those three things that you fail to accomplish, you could argue that's a failure too. But I'd say those are the three minimum metrics you should be looking at.
I'll agree.
It's a debate.
I disagree with all of this. I would add, while I disagree, I'll add that if you don't get the outcomes you wanted at the outset, it's a failure. You might be under budget, on time, everything looks shiny and great, but you don't have the outcomes. The business outcomes you were looking for from this transformation didn't happen. Now you're stuck with a brand new ERP system that you custom built for yourself, hired people. That's failure. Success to me looks like you define the strategy, not just the strategy, but the outcomes, and you define that before you even start. What does outcome success look like for you? Have KPIs that measure that, and that's when you've met most of them, that's success. And if you haven't, you can have varying degrees of success. But failure is having a brand new ERP or transformation system or AI that does something, but you're not advancing your outcomes.
Certainly, that ROI is obviously the reason in which you implement in the first place. So great question. Thank you for that question and great answers, definitely. So let's go to Greg.
This is really kind of building on that same question and something that Walker was saying as well. Would you endorse planning for the next 12 months and your investments that you're going to be making over the next year or looking at the larger window, 3 to 5 years ahead and planning for that investment all the way along?
Great question. All right, AB, 12 months, 3 to 5 years.
I think both. I can't say both. I picked the long term. And we do this a lot with our clients, right? I teach strategic planning. Look out 3 to 5 years and see what the business is going to be doing, what you want the business to be doing in 5 years. And work it backwards to see where you need to be in 1 year. And that becomes your tactical plan. What are you going to do in 1 year that feeds into your 5-year plan? And 5 years is too much, as you all know, to plan for technology. We don't know what's going to happen next year. But again, you can plan for outcomes. You can plan for business outcomes that you want to achieve in 5 years, and see if you have the tools and the processes today to have it, to achieve that, and work backwards and see what happens.
That's a really good answer.
So I'd say within, sorry, the production, are you talking to me? No. Okay.
Answer the question, there's another one.
Oh, gotcha, okay, sorry. Clearly I can't multitask and answer a
He's
question.
telling you to go faster. He said back there, like, let's do this.
So I'm gonna say 12 months or less. You can't look further out than 12 months, partly because technology is changing so quickly. You don't know where your own business is gonna be. You know, we've talked to people here in this conference so far that have talked about how their own transformations would start, and then in the middle of the transformation, they went out and acquired a company, or they acquired a product line, expanded into a new market or whatever. Something material changed to their business. So those are two reasons. The third reason why you wanna just look at a 12-month horizon is that you wanna hold your vendors' feet to the fire too. If you sign a 3 to 5 year SaaS contract and a 3 to 5 year implementation contract, you've lost all your leverage and you limit your flexibility when things do change, and they will change. So I think looking at a 12-month window is really the way to go. Forget the future beyond that.
All right. We've got a question in the back.
I do. So what I've found in working past 25 years in distribution with various ERP systems is that the average ERP is far more robust than the average user knows how to use. And kind of how that happens is you go through, you have a successful implementation, there's money allocated towards training individuals, you have SMEs in your different departments, and then eventually over time, people are promoted, they move on to other jobs, and there's not that continuing education dollars budgeted to keep up with the education. So then you have a marginal user training somebody new on a system, and then eventually over time, well, this is now just a bad system, it doesn't work. Do you advise your clients to budget for continuing ongoing training so that the people are able to keep up with the speed, especially in a multi-tenant environment where every 6 months they're introducing new feature functionality?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I find interesting is that companies will spend all this time and money in technology and transformation, and then as soon as they get to that finish line of go live, maybe some minor stabilization for a couple weeks after, they sort of move on. They move on to the next phase of the project, or they go back to their day jobs, and they just let the technology sit there without really optimizing and fine-tuning it. It's always fascinating to me because you get these companies that spend tons of money, but they won't spend that extra little bit just to optimize what you just did. And there's times where we're working with companies where you think, why are you worried about going on to phase 2 and 3 and 4 and doing all this advanced functionality when you can't even close the books? You can't even do your basic core functionality well. Like, get that part nailed down, do it really well, then worry about all the other stuff, you know, the new technologies that you could deploy after that. But so many companies just, they bite off more than they can chew. They buy all this stuff and then they end up with like 80% shelfware, and then the other 20% they sort of use.
So the short answer is yes, we advise our clients to put the money aside and do it right, but more often than not, it doesn't happen, right? And then you have, especially in the public sector world, vendors coming in doing train the trainer. Sounds really great, train the trainer. We're gonna train 5 people to be super users, and then they go and train thousands of employees in your organization. So that training piece never happens. The other thing I've seen in the last 5 years especially is training and configuration sessions are combined. The value of that training, if it's incrementally lower every time the knowledge is transferred, then it's not useful. So I think we need to look at tools that can do it instead of people doing the training.
very good question.
And by the way, I'll give a little shout out
Yeah.
to one of our sponsors. One of our sponsors that is sponsoring the live stream actually is Onboard ERP. So there's a company based out of Europe. They're called OnboardERP.com, and they're starting to get a lot more traction here in North America. But they do all training and adoption types of services as well. So to your point about training and adoption, check out OnboardERP.com. The people on the stream have already seen the promo videos for it and everything, but thought I'd mention it to the in-person crowd as well.
Yeah, and on the stream, you can go into the sponsor exhibit too, to kind of check out more information. We put some links in there for you as well, to check out Onboard. Eric also did a live stream with them not too long ago on our YouTube channel. So you can kind of see their stakeholders as well. So good shout out, for sure. Any more audience questions? Oh,
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I got a good one. And I'm
Why is he here? Who let him in?
I don't know. I
I got a good one. I
specifically
gotta
asked.
ask Amy to answer first, though, because I'm gonna give him a softball. We'll see. But you have this long drawn out implementation. It's been fraught with risk the whole time. You're just sick and tired of it, and somebody says, "Just pull the trigger. We need to go live. We've got to go live. It's going to cost too much money to delay." What do you do?
I don't go live. Well, one of the first pieces of advice we give to our clients when we start an ERP selection, contract negotiation, what have you, is don't let the vendor dictate the go live date. And don't agree to it. Even if you do, it should be fuzzy, right? Because your world is not the vendor's world. They don't know what constraints you have, what might come up, what your blackout dates are, audits. Like government people know the different curveballs that get thrown at you during an implementation. So if we're in that situation where it's a long drawn out, fraught with risk implementation and someone's saying just do it, I don't want to be in that room when they just do it. Because the best thing to do at that point would be to stop and reassess everything. And maybe do a re-implementation, reassessment. I don't know. You should be in that place if you have competent project management teams in place.
Rather than just agreeing, I'll just give an example that maybe illustrates your point too. But when I was earlier in my career, it was one of the first implementation projects I had managed. It was a manufacturing company, mid-sized company in the Northeast US. And the CEO grew frustrated with the project because the project had been going on for about 18 months or so. And they were running, I remember the numbers, they were running at a run rate of close to $100,000 a month. That's what they're spending on the implementation, which that had been the case throughout the entire implementation. And the implementation had gotten pushed out twice already. And we were recommending another 30 days because the client had done a bunch of customization late in the game. The customization wasn't fully tested, and we didn't even know if it was working fully. Wasn't integrated yet with the other systems they were tying into it. And the CEO just got so frustrated. He said, "You know what? No, we're not delaying again. I'm not spending another $100,000 on this project. We are going live on that date." And being good consultants, unfortunately, you have to give your advice, and then ultimately business owners, business leaders make their decisions, and you're not just going to bail out because you disagree with what they're doing. You say, "Okay, you're making this decision. I think you should do this, but if you're going to do this, let's make the best of it and mitigate the risk." So he decides to pull the trigger. It went live, and in the 60 days following the go live, they lost not just delayed orders, but lost orders, canceled orders because the customers couldn't get the product and they couldn't get the product out in time. It was over $10 million for about a $100 million company. So they're doing $100 million a year, and they lost 10% of their sales right after go live. And beyond that, there was other customer satisfaction impact, delayed revenue, delayed shipments, and all that stuff. Those are the ones that weren't lost, but they lost over $10 million. So you look at that and you say, okay, he could have spent another $100,000, might not have eliminated all the risk, but it would have been a good hedge against losing over $10 million of sales. So that's the way you have to look at it. Is you may be in a bind. It may be super painful. You might need to scale back. You might need to right size the project or do something different. But to just say we're just gonna jump in and go for it, that's super risky, and you're putting your entire business at risk when you do that.
Absolutely. We got time for one more, and then we will close out the panel here. So make it a good one. Pressure's on.
Well, I'll try.
Okay, two. All right.
So again, this question is coming from a non-technologist, right? We're manufacturers, we're in operations, we know nothing about technology. Know a little bit, but not enough. So earlier there was a question around one-stop shop versus best-of-breed solutions. And you know, coming from a medium-sized or small-sized to a medium-sized manufacturer, neither of them are kind of quite fitting in terms of what we want to do. So is there a third option around a one-stop platform where you build, let's say, best-in-class solutions that fit your needs?
There's, yes, there are. There's a number of different platforms, and I think that's where much of the market is going. And we talked in my keynote this morning, I talked about how there's a proliferation of options and alternatives to the traditional monolithic ERP systems, and software platforms is one of them. And you have a few different models there. You have companies like, just as an example, Salesforce. They created the Force platform, and it's not just a CRM system that Salesforce is, it's a Force platform that includes Salesforce, but now you've got all these other options that you can deploy and build on that one platform. I think a lot of vendors are starting to do that, including some of the vendors that you'll hear from here this afternoon are kind of moving toward that platform model, and I'm curious to hear their thoughts on this too. But that's one model, is the software platform model. The other model is that interoperability model, where you have companies like Palantir and Snowflake that are building entire companies on not trying to be everything to everyone, not trying to create an ERP system per se, but creating something that ties it together and gives you visibility and analytics in an enterprise-wide sort of way without necessarily having to rip out all your back office systems or replace all your back office systems. So I think the good news is whether that's right or wrong for you doesn't really matter. The good news is you have a lot of options to choose from. You don't have to go just one path. There's all these different directions you can go.
Yeah, and I disagree. No, I'll add to that. 10, 15 years ago, you had to build interfaces. The APIs are so strong today that most vendors that allow APIs to interact with their databases, that's the way to go. If you find something, again, this best of breed fits a certain function that you want outcomes out of. And you need to define all of this up front before buying something. What does your interface diagram look like? Where's the tentacles that go from one system to another or one process to another? Once you define that, you can then go shopping for things that the Lego bricks are out there. You just need to define that.
Absolutely, and you're in the right spot, right? You're in good company here. Many people have been in that situation, being able to kind of see what's best for your business, and the fact that you have that mindset, that's already, such a great avenue for success. So congratulations on that. And so one more question over here, and then we will round out the panel.
Okay, you're an enterprise and you have homebrew ERP system, and the processes are really not standardized. The knowledge is in the people's minds, it's not well written, and you want to implement some mainstream ERP system. Would you decide to go like a big bang for all the core functionalities, or would you go like incremental, step by step, go live, like start with the sales, then supply chain, finances, and so on, or you have some maybe third options? Thank you.
Maybe you want to take that one to start?
I want to say it depends again.
Well,
Sorry.
we made it a long time. I feel like we did a really good job.
Depends on what your operation is, but the best practice typically tends to be going after your core financials, HRIS, payroll type processes, making sure that they're modernized, the processes are systemized, and it just works well. And then you can add on things too. You mentioned sales and distribution, right?
All the core functions.
Yeah, so if you consider that to be a core function, then include that in there. Make sure that, again, the interfaces, the things that transfer data between each other different modules and who needs what from an operational perspective needs to be defined. And that should dictate the strategy for Big Bang or one at a time. because you can have the pro of a big bang is everything just supposed to work all at once. The con is that the con of doing incremental is you might have a working module right here, but then other modules and other processes are on older systems that don't play well with what's working. So really, how do you sequence this needs to be predefined and architected before you get on with it.
And it sort of gets back to the waterfall versus agile dilemma too, because if you're trying to standardize processes and move from a fragmented way of doing business to a more common way of doing business, that's where waterfall can help. I mean, you can actually use waterfall to your advantage and say, now we're going to define what that future state operating model is going to be. And I know Adam and Dominic earlier today talked about future state operating models. If you didn't see that session, it's a really good one that I've seen before that you can watch on demand. But you want to define that future state operating model and then figure out how you're going to move your enterprise technologies to that. But taking that time to design your processes in the future state first, I think that's the key thing there.
Absolutely, and great question, all great questions. I would highly recommend, if you have more questions for both Eric and Avi, that you find them during happy hour, maybe the band. There might be some literal dancing later today that we're excited about. But if we want to engage with you further after the event, how do we do that? And I'll start with you, Avi.
We are on every social platform. Find me on LinkedIn. I think I live on LinkedIn every day. So me or my colleagues in the audience here, you can find us on LinkedIn, TikTok. I don't do as much as you do on TikTok, but we're on there. But our website is averoadvisors.com, and I'll be around later. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Avi, for joining us, and thank you to the Avero team for making all of this possible. We're so glad to have you here. So, Eric, how do we connect with you if we don't already?
Thirdstage-consulting.com is our website. You can follow me on all the social media platforms or go to erickimberling.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was such a great conversation. Thank you to you guys.